Okay, so let's just check that everything is going live and we're ready. Okay, so welcome everybody to today's live stream. So I'm Phil and you're watching the IELTS Grind. So first of all, let's just check that everybody can hear what I'm talking about, just as I'm doing my little checks to see if everything works out fine. Okay, so if you're joining us for the first time, so I'll be talking today on screen, and we have Michael who is in the chat ready to answer any questions that you have. So hello, thank you for joining us today. So at any point, if you want to ask any questions, then just put that into the live chat and we will try and help you in the best way that we know how. So how is the sound, everyone? I know there's a bit of a delay with what I'm saying and what I can read in the chat. But how are we doing? So I'm just checking to see if I can see what's happening. Aha. There's a bit of a delay. There we go. Yeah, I can hear the delay. Hello Naz, welcome back. Okay, so let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about IELTS speaking. So hopefully everybody can hear us. So let's look at the objectives to today's live stream. So there's a very common question that you are likely to hear in the first part 1 of your speaking. Do you work or study? You're almost more than likely to hear this question. Not always, but quite likely. So we're going to talk about how to answer that question, and there's a few things you need to know about. We're going to look at some useful vocabulary to do with work or study, particularly with study today. And it's just to give you a flavour of what you should be doing when you're practicing vocabulary. And we're going to talk about getting grammar right. I'm going to describe a few situations where we have to use a particular grammar tense and just talk about grammar opportunities. The opportunities, as Michael likes to say, to flex your grammar muscles. I'm not going to do the thing that he does. You have to watch one of our videos on our channel for that. Okay, we're also going to be talking about sentence frames. Sentence frames are these high-level structures that you can use and adapt for different situations. And it's things that you can learn to use, but perhaps you wouldn't come up with them on your own off the top of your head. If you learn the structures, you can learn to adapt them for different situations, and it just pushes your score up because it makes you sound like a higher level student, even if you're not quite there overall. And of course, we're going to look at some example questions for do you work or study, and talk about how to answer them. Hopefully, we'll get a few of you writing down some examples in the chat here. Okay, so if everyone's ready, let's jump into it. Okay, so this question, do you work or study? Basically, when you come to part 1 of your IELTS test, part 1 lasts about 4 to 5 minutes, and it's more of an interview sort of situation where the examiner is going to ask you questions about you, your experiences, familiar topics, things that you can probably talk about. And it's more than likely you're going to get 1 of 2 types of topics in part 1 for the first set of questions, first sort of 4 or 5 questions. And they are, do you work or study, or a question about your neighbourhood. Now, I know that Michael has got an entire live stream planned for this week, I think, about neighbourhoods. So today we're looking at the other question, do you work or study? So let's think about what we have to do with this question. Okay, so what does the examiner want to know? When they ask you this question, All they want to know is they've got two different lists of questions. One question is about a student and the other question is about a worker. When they ask you this question, do you work or study, they just want to know which of the sets of questions should I ask, okay? So you don't have to give your life story. You don't have to talk about every single moment of the 4 years of your degree. You just have to say, oh, currently I'm a student studying this degree, or I've just got a job working as an engineer. Something like this is perfectly fine for this question, because if you give too much information away, you may not have anything to say later. So what if you aren't a student or you're not working? Well, it doesn't matter. The examiner doesn't care about the truth, okay? They just want to ask you some questions to evaluate your level of English. So if it was me, I would choose either being a student, because most of us have been a student and it's easy to remember, or just talk about your dream job. If you're in between studies and work, just choose one or the other. It doesn't really matter. You can say to the examiner, well, actually, I'm not currently working and I've just graduated, but let's talk about my studies. That would be fine as well. So they just want to know which set of questions to ask you. And the most important question is, should you memorize your answer? So you know that this question is more than likely to come up, but you definitely should not be memorizing any answers. Any answer that sounds memorized throughout the speaking test is likely to be disregarded, meaning the examiner will not consider that sentence or that answer when they evaluate your score. So never memorize things word for word, but do practice things so they come more naturally. Okay, so we know this question might come up, but we don't want to memorize it. Okay, so how are we doing, guys, on the sound? Can everyone still hear me? If everything is okay, if I need to be closer or further away from my microphone, let me know in the chat. But for now, let's look at a couple of these questions, okay? So we've got some example questions here about study. So these are all inspired by the real exam. You may not see these exact questions, but you may see similar type questions coming up. So things like, where do you study? What is the name of your college or university, etc. Okay, we're going to see these questions a little bit later on as well. And some questions if you were asked, if you were giving answers for being an employee. What is your job? Why did you choose that job? Etc. So these are the types of questions we're talking about. But before we go, and oh great, Naz is saying you can hear me clearly. That's a good news. I was struggling with my microphone just before we started. Okay, so these are the types of questions we might see. But let's go and look at it from the different stages that we need in order to have a good answer. Okay, so what we're going to look at here is just some useful vocabulary, and this is particularly about school. Okay, so just this is how I would go about learning vocabulary. So firstly, I might brainstorm a few words. Let's talk about secondary and high school. So in the UK, I would say secondary school, and we've got Michael in the chat. He's American, so he says high school. It's exactly the same thing, really. It's the same period of your life, but in the UK we say secondary school, and in the US they say high school mainly. Okay, so a good term is school subjects. School subjects, things like English, maths, biology, etc. Okay. School campus. So the school campus is actually where the school is, the grounds that the school is on, where the school buildings are, school campus. And you can say the same university campus. Okay. Okay, is it Michael's birthday today? I didn't know. Okay, so moving on. School curriculum or school syllabus. So a curriculum, a syllabus, they're slightly different, but what we're talking about here is the academic plan for what you study throughout the year or within a course or a module. So the curriculum is all of the things you are going to study during that year, including the school subjects and the topics within that, a school curriculum or a syllabus. They're so similar that most natives can't tell them apart. And to be honest, I'm struggling today as well. Okay, so the next term that we could use, extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities. So we've got curricula, which comes from curriculum. So the curriculum are the things that you study, that you do during your school life. And extra, meaning sort of more than, really. What this means is not the school subjects you study during the day, but the things you do afterwards. Perhaps you're in a drama club and you put on a play. That would be an extracurricular activity. It could refer to joining a sports team at the school and doing things after the school day. In the UK, we often just say after school clubs because that's when they happen. Okay, and what we're going to do is look at a few sentences to do with this. So we have the last term there on the left, coursework and extra credit assignment. So coursework is to do with you have a project, maybe you have to write a long essay or something like this in order to get a grade or a mark in your school subject. The extra credit assignment, this is something we don't have in the UK, but they definitely have this in the US. It's when their grade drops and they do extra work to push the grade up. We don't do that in the UK because we're just perfect students. Our grades never drop. That's not true. Okay, so I've already revealed it, but here is an example sentence using some of this vocabulary. Okay, so I'm currently studying several school subjects, but I would have to say that biology is my favorite. I'm currently studying several school subjects, but I would have to say that biology is my favorite. So this is the way we could use that term. Our school campus is only a few miles from my home, so I can actually cycle there and back every day. So again, I'm going to give you lots of American and British terms. So in the UK, we generally say to cycle somewhere. But I think in the US, Mike can correct me, to bike, they often say, did you bike there? Did you bike back? I didn't get to choose which subjects I wanted to study because my school has a set curriculum. So a set curriculum, you just study what the school tells you to study. So this is a great answer if they ask you, why did you choose that subject? You might say, well, I didn't choose it. I had to do it. With all the homework I have to do, I don't really have time for any extracurricular activities. So obviously the T in time there shouldn't be capitalized. It's just, I don't know how to use PowerPoint. So with all the homework I have to do, I don't really have time for any extracurricular activities. So I have so much homework, I can't join the sports team. And finally, I had been failing the class, so my teacher gave me an extra credit assignment to raise my grade. Okay, so this is how we would use that phrase, extra credit. It's in order to get a better grade. Okay, so let's talk about university and college. So just a few more words. Let's put them up on screen. Okay, they're all there. So do we know any of these words? If you can think of a sentence for any of these words, how would you use them? While I'm talking, you can write a comment in the chat, the live chat, and Michael will tell you if you're using the words correctly. Okay, so let's go through it. So the first couple words we have here are dormitory and halls of residence. So a dormitory is where you sleep. It's often a long room with several beds in it, but it can just mean a building where people stay, particularly for students or for travelers. If you do a hike, you might stay in a dormitory. But in the UK, we often call that building, as students, where you stay for your first year, we call that the halls of residence. So yeah, I stayed in one in my first year of university. Okay, so Mike's saying that perhaps my sentences are a little bit cut off. I'll try and read them, and if they're cut off, I'll make sure that I read them out to you. So if there's anything you can't see, just let me know in the description. Oh, I can see, yeah, it's cut off a little bit to the left. Never mind, I will read them to you. Okay, so a degree, a major or minor. So in the UK, we often describe what we study at university as a degree. I have a degree in maths. But in the US, they always refer to it as a major. So they have a different system in the US to what we have in the UK. So generally, they study lots of different subjects early on in their college career, and then they select one major topic to get their degree in, and they might also have other minor topics that they get their degree in. So it's okay to say your major or your degree, but just be aware that the Brits and the Americans, they use different terms for this. So some other words to do with what we've got. So a lecture, a seminar, and a tutorial. So these are different ways that we can study at university. So a lecture is a little bit like what I'm doing. I'm just talking at you, and there's no real interaction back. So a lecture, there's a professor who just sort of stands there in front of 50, 100 people talking about the topic. Whereas a seminar is much smaller. Maybe there's 10, 15 people, normally around a table, and there's much more of a discussion. Whereas a tutorial could be just 1, 2, or maybe 3 students and 1 professor or tutor. So the next phrase, to pull an all-nighter. This happens a lot to students where they spend the whole night studying. They basically just don't sleep to study. Okay, so I'm just going to interrupt this broadcast to go and see if I can fix the issue I have with my screen. So let's see if I can figure this out. So if I just do that, boom, let's see what happens. Let's go back to it. Is that any better? Oh no, I haven't fixed it. Never mind. Maybe it'll be even worse now. Okay, I will fix that for the next live stream so we know what it is. Okay, so back to the next one. A graduation ceremony. This is quite a good collocation. These words naturally go together. And a dissertation. A dissertation is normally one of the last assignments you have at university, where you have to write a fairly long essay. My dissertations were about 10,000 words when I had to write them. And it's sometimes what you need to do to graduate in order to get your degree. So let's look at some example sentences. I'll put them all up and see if they all fit. Okay, so I really enjoyed my first year at uni because I got to stay in halls of residence. I wonder why I enjoyed it. I'm actually studying for a bachelor degree in art history. I don't have too many contact hours, only a couple of lectures a week and a few seminars. I missed my graduation ceremony because I fell asleep in the student union. So the student union is basically the bar in universities in the UK. And I pulled an all-nighter to try and hand my dissertation in on time. It was just awful. I don't know if that means the dissertation or if it means the all-nighter. So here are just some example sentences of how I would use the vocabulary in context. So the key thing here is when you learn new words and high-level vocabulary, it's always a good idea to try and write example sentences just so you can learn how to use it. And of course, for speaking, you've got to read them out loud as often as you can, because the more you hear words, the more you use them, the more likely you are to use them in your actual speaking test. Okay, so how are we still going? Any questions in the chat at the moment? Let's get a little bit more comfortable. So we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite topic, which is grammar. Now, of the 4 things you are graded on in your speaking, grammar is one of the most difficult to improve. The best way to improve your grammar is actually to read quite a lot. If you read anything in English, you're going to naturally pick up grammar as you go, and there's really no other way to learn it other than just being exposed to grammar and trying to recognize why a particular tense is used. So we're going to talk about different scenarios here, and I'm going to give you an example of the tense I would use and an example sentence. Okay, so talking about past events. The grammar tense that we want to use here is past simple. For example, first I went to high school, and then when I graduated I moved to the UK to do a foundation course in art. So what I'm talking about here is a series of events which are all finished. I went to high school, now it's finished. I graduated, that is finished. I moved to the UK, that is also finished. So I'm using the past simple. One of the issues that Michael and I see is that quite often students will start in the past tense, when I was a child, and then they continue in the present simple. When I was a child, I go to school every day, I love to eat food. Yeah, that's all the present tense now. So make sure if you're talking about events in a series, you're using past simple. Hey, it's Leonardo. How are you doing? Okay, so we're describing current actions, current events, what's happening right now. We want to use present continuous or present progressive. It's the same tense. An example of this. I'm finishing my degree at the moment, and I should graduate by the end of the summer. So I'm finishing my degree. The action is in progress right now. I haven't finished it yet, so I'm using present continuous. But this is an example of how you could use it in the topic of do you work or study. Talking about recently finished actions. So of course, this is everyone's favorite, present perfect. I love the present perfect, but I'm just weird like that. No, the present perfect is one of those tricky tenses to use in English. So first of all, we don't use it that often because we only use it in particular ways in English. You couldn't have a whole conversation using the present perfect because we're not always talking about results in the present. Whenever we want to get into details, we need to start using other grammar tenses. But here's an example of what I mean. So we've just broken up for the Easter holidays, so I've had some time. I've had some downtime to relax this week. We've just broken up for the Easter holidays, so I've had some downtime to relax this week. So we've just broken up for the Easter holidays. That's the present perfect. The result is now, in the present, I've got this free time. But if someone asked me a question there, they might say, oh, what have you been doing? Oh, I did this, I did that, then I went there. I would use past simple. So we can't have a whole conversation with present perfect, which is one of the reasons a lot of students don't use it in the right way, or don't use it when they should. So if it's a recently finished action, in particular, present perfect is your friend. Okay, so talking about results in the past. Past perfect, also a favorite of mine. Let's see an example. So I had started studying to be a doctor when I realized that I hated the sight of blood. So I did a degree in law instead, because there's less blood in law. So I had started studying. So past perfect, continuous, or progressive, if you want to call it that. So this thing was in progress in the past, and then it was interrupted, and the result in the past is the person started studying something else. And speculating about the past. This is a nice one. If you can use the third conditional in your speaking test, this is very high level grammar. But it's not easy to use because you can't use it in all situations. So, an example. If I hadn't met my father's friend, I would never had thought about becoming a paleontologist. So again, thought there shouldn't be capitalized. It's just my bad PowerPoint skills. So if I hadn't met my father's friend, I would never had thought about becoming a paleontologist. So paleontologist, someone who studies the natural history of the world using fossils. Think Ross from Friends. Okay, so this is high-level grammar. I'm thinking about how the past could be changed if one thing had been altered. If I hadn't met the father's friend, then I wouldn't be a paleontologist now. Okay, so the point of this is grammar is used in particular ways for particular reasons. Your job, while you're practicing for the IELTS and when you go on to be an English speaker afterwards, is just to practice when we use certain structures and try and realize why. The best way, as I said, is to read. The more you read, the better it will be. So in the past perfect example, can we just say started? So we could say I started studying to be a doctor when I realized that I hated the sight of blood. Yeah, it's the only difference is when you say I started studying, we're just saying we're talking about the event, just the act of starting. But the difference here is really, I wish I had a whiteboard, is that we're talking about the point in time where we started, we were already studying, and then after that point we realized that we hated the sight of blood, possibly during the first dissection of a body, which sounds terrible, and then because of that the person decided to change degrees. So it's just by changing it from the past simple to the past perfect, it gives a slightly different message, because that's all grammar is. It's the message to the listener. What exactly do we want them to hear? Okay, so that's basically it. And as Michael said in the comments, it's to emphasize it. That's what language is. It's all about messages. I couldn't tell you how to say that in Italian. I've forgotten all my Italian, unfortunately. Okay, so let's move on. So we're talking about high-level sentence frames here. So let's put up a few examples. So a sentence frame. This is when you take a high-level sentence which on your own you probably wouldn't be able to think of off the top of your head. But by practicing it beforehand, you've learned the parts of the sentence and exactly what you need to do to adapt it for different uses. So I'm just going to show you a few examples of this. So what we've got here is the reason why is because okay. So what we're going to do is, if I show you the example, So the reason why I love history is because it can connect us with the past. So what we need to do is to put the subject and the verb after the phrase the reason why. We have to remember is because. Many of my students forget is, and then we follow it in the next part of the phrase as subject and verb. It's basically clauses, but let's just break it down to the simple components. So the reason why I love history is because it can connect us with the past. The reason why you have to work hard at uni is because the job market is so competitive. So you can see that we've taken the same phrase here, the reason why is because and we've just adapted it to use it in a different situation. And it follows the same thing. We've got subject, verb, and then after is because, subject, verb. The reason why Bob dropped out is because he was really stupid. So dropped out of university, dropped out of college, stopped going. The reason why subject, verb, Bob dropped out is because he was, subject, verb, really stupid. Poor Bob. He couldn't hack it. So let's look at another example. So I'm moving through this fairly quickly, but if there are any more questions, you can ask in the chat. We've got Mike there ready to answer your questions, and if I see your question, I will talk about it on screen too. But we've got another one. So the thing I enjoy most about is that. So here it's the thing I enjoy most about. We can have a noun or we can have an ing verb, and then is that subject verb. So the thing I enjoy most about biology is that we get to dissect frogs. So obviously this is not the same person from before who didn't like the sight of blood. This is a different person. So here we've got the thing I enjoy most about noun, biology, is that we get to dissect frogs. Dissect frogs, cut them up. This is actually something I never did at school. I've seen this in American movies, but in the UK we never get to dissect frogs or little what is it that you dissected, Mike? Was it a baby pig? I can't remember, but we never did this at school, not at my school anyway. The thing I enjoy most about being a student is that I can study almost anything I want. So here, instead of using the noun, we're using the ing verb. So this is because we have the preposition about. After that, after we have prepositions, the verb is an ing verb. So the thing I enjoyed most about being a student is that I can study almost anything I want. The thing I enjoy most about being a secret agent is that I have to kill everyone I tell. Oh dear, what have I done? So it's the same rule here. We're using ing form. But you can see, again, we take the same sentence frame and we just adapt it for different situations by learning the components, the parts that we need to put into it. This is a really good way to boost up your writing and speaking skill. Okay, another example of a sentence frame. Okay, Mike is saying something about baby pigs were poked and cut apart. Okay, yeah, okay. Have to. Oh yes, I do have to. It's 007 as a spy. I have to do it. There's a bit of a delay here. I can see in the chat and what I'm saying. Okay, so the next example. In order to, it is necessary to, So here, in order to become a vet, it is necessary to study for nearly 7 years. So again, my punctuation isn't great here because it is capitalized. But that again is just me being not very good at the technology. In order to pay for college, it is necessary to take out a lot of student loans. So it's the same thing, we just adapt it slightly for different situations. In order to improve your English, it is necessary to watch the IELTS Grind YouTube channel. Yeah. That is just a plug for the channel. We have lots and lots of videos on this channel. We've spoken about a lot of things over the last year. There's a lot of really good material, and just to take you through everything you need to study for the IELTS. Just check out our channel and you will find everything you need. Okay, one more example. Even though it has really benefited me as So, even though I've had to repeat the year, it has really benefited me as I now have a better grasp of the subject. Even though it can cost an arm and a leg, college has really benefited me as I have better job opportunities. To cost an arm and a leg, meaning very, very expensive. Even though some say taking there's a mistake here. Can you spot the mistake? Even though some say taking a gap year, that's a typo, is silly, it has really benefited many young people as they can learn more about other cultures. Okay, so you can see again how we're kind of adapting this. And after even though, we have a clause beginning with a subject and verb, and then after as, it's the same idea. And we can adapt in this, we can adapt it has for things like college has, or a subject like that. And we can change me for any object pronoun, I, them, they, whatever it is. It's adaptable. But that's the whole point of sentence frames. You learn a basic structure that you go and you're able to then adapt. So even though it's an adverb, it's a conjunction really. So I suppose it is an adverb if it's a conjunction, right? So it's in the same group as however, but, these kind of words. It's just after even though we follow it with the subject verb. That's what we need to put into the gap after even though. Even though I've had, even though it can, even though some say taking. Some say is the subject there. Okay, so let's keep going. So things to remember when you're answering questions, okay? So stay on topic. The thing that many students do, which is not great, is they listen to the question and they don't quite answer it in the way that it was asked. So make sure that you don't stray off topic too much. As with all questions in English, answer the question directly. The way that we answer questions in English is we give the direct response and then we follow it up with supporting sentences like reasons for the answer. And the other thing is know when to stop. You're not going to get points for filling the entire 5 minutes with one answer. You need to say as much as is necessary to answer the question. If you find yourself running out of ideas, it's best to wrap things up. You can do that by summarizing. I will show you what I mean in an example now. So if we look at an example here. So the examiner has asked us, some tough questions. If we look at the example here, when do you study? Okay. So we imagine that the examiner has already asked us, do you work or study? And we've said, I'm currently a student. So where do you study? So I might say, I'm currently studying at the University of Kent, which is located in the southeast of England. It's in quite a small town, but I'm really enjoying the studies there at the moment. So I've just given a direct answer, where it is, and a few details about its geographic location and possibly what I think about it. I haven't gone on and on and on and spoken about my entire 3 or 4 year degree. Okay, so I'm looking at the chat, and we've got some excellent interaction from Leonardo, but I don't see anyone else leaving any sentences or having a go. So what I'm going to do is just go through a few examples of this, and then we're going to move on. So, for example, what subject are you studying? How would I go about answering that? So I might say, well, I actually chose to study history, which has always been a passion of mine, and I took the opportunity to go to university to study it because I really wanted to develop my interest in it. So again, I directly answered the question there, and I gave a few supporting details about my passion and why exactly I chose to study it. Okay, so yeah, okay, so I can see Michael is helping with the answers there. Excellent. Okay, so here are some example questions for do you work or study, for the study part. So you can have a look at these and practice them at home. Now, if you are brave and if you would like Michael and I to have a look at your speaking and give you our feedback, all you need to do is to link, basically record yourself and send us a link of the recording. You can do that by either sending us it in a comment on any of our videos, or you can send it to an email, which is corrections@theartsgrind.com, which is in the description of this video, and I'm sure that Michael is going to put that into the chat. So if you are brave enough and you want some feedback from some real English teachers who have taught the IELTS for a long time, you can just send a recording of yourself and we'll look at that and give you some feedback. Okay. So here are some example questions for the other side of the coin, if we were talking about a job. Okay, so let's look at one example together. So if we go down to, do you get on well with your co-workers? Yeah. So this is always a difficult question, just because who gets on with their co-workers? But anyway, this is how I would approach this. So, that's a difficult question. I suppose it depends on the co-worker and on the day. What I mean by that is some of my colleagues are much easier to get on with. They have a much mellower personality. But there are always those types of co-workers who are just annoying. So I always prefer working with people who have a nice outgoing personality, and I kind of steer clear of the power hungry people who are trying to climb the corporate ladder. So that is how I would go about answering that. I've clearly said in the introductory sentence, my topic sentence really, that it depends. I'm going to talk about more than one thing. And then throughout the rest of the answer, I fulfilled what I said. I didn't waffle on, I didn't give too much detail, but I did do the thing I said I was going to do. Okay, so yeah, I can see how Mike's put in the email. So again, if you want to have a go at any of these questions and you would like us to have a look at that, you can record yourself, either a video or an MP3 on your phone. Go through, answer the questions, and we will give you some feedback, some tips of how you can improve. And if you send that to corrections@theartsgrind.com, that would be good. Yeah. So, are there any last questions before we end? So if you've got any last questions about this, so this is just really a bit of a taster of do you work or study. So in a video this week, Mike will be talking about the other most common subject, which is about your neighborhood, where do you live, and things like that. So he will be talking about some vocabulary, and I'm sure he's going to give lots of examples about that. So remember, for this topic, don't memorize answers. You know generally what's going to come up, but don't memorize answers, because anything that you memorize will be disregarded by the examiner. And in theory, if everything was memorized, you'd come out with a very bad score. Remember, your goal is to learn English. It's not to learn how to fake the test, because when you go on to study abroad or work abroad, we actually use this language. And if you don't go about learning the language, you're going to be in trouble. So thanks very much for watching, everyone. And we will see you in a live stream again tomorrow, the same time. But tomorrow it will be Mike who will be there. And I will see you guys again on Friday. So let me close out the live stream and see you later. Bye-bye.